Alors, bonjour à tous. Bonjour aux amis. Écoutez, since I wrote my paper in French, I'll deliver this in English. And you'll see that I'm taking a chance here. I'll have to look a bit at my paper because it's in English and it's not my first language. Aboriginal scholars sometimes convey abstract ideas through the use of stories. And so instead of summarizing my paper, a most difficult exercise in the short lapse of time that I have been imparted with, I will tell you two stories that express some of the most basic ideas that I believe a normative theory of federalism entails. These stories, by the way, are not the property of any particular culture or nation. There is no need to be authentic to commune with them. My first story goes like this. He was a warrior. He had fought long and hard to save his city from its enemies. He had fought long and hard and had been defeated. How could his city, birthplace of democracy, have been forced to bend to the brutal will of an enemy whose oligarchic regime was an insult to the very ideal of a political regime based on the consent of the people? Defeat was not the only thing he had to contend with. To the ignominy of military disaster, the dismal spectacle of an ensuing civil war had to be added. He was understandably traumatized by all these events. And so from warrior, he turned into a word warrior. Not one who knows all the answers, but one who asks questions. Not one who knows the truth, but one who seeks it. He himself, by the way, wrote nothing. Others recorded what he had to say. His was a world where gods made no pretense to epistemological authority. In other words, they claimed no ultimate authority on the nature of truth. The religion of his time knew of no official doctrines, of no canonical texts. And so since there was no need for it, no ecclesiastical body could be found with authority to transmit and interpret a dogma. He was a pious man, but he strongly believed that the gods were themselves subjected to the rule of reason. To a young man who claimed that piety or holiness is learning how to please the gods in word and deed by prayers and sacrifices, he would answer by a question. The point which I should first wish to understand is whether the pious or holy is beloved by the gods because it is holy, or holy because it is beloved by the gods. Is something true because the gods consider it true? Or do the gods consider something as true because it is true according to the higher law of reason? His quest for understanding was existential. He needed to know, for the gods had made an extraordinary statement about him. A friend of his had asked a prophetess whether or not there existed a wiser man than he. To his utter disbelief, the prophetess answered the answer in the negative. And so he spent his entire life harassing people with questions about the nature of wisdom, for he knew very well that he was not the wisest man of his time. But as it turned out, no one gave him a satisfactory answer. His quest was not just the hobby of an idle man. He was no sophist. As we will now see, he was willing to lay down his life in the name of his convictions. Very few skeptics would be willing to do that, to go that far. Indeed, one sad day, Socrates, as you must have surmised, was accused by his own fellow citizens of not acknowledging the gods, which the state acknowledged, but some other new divinities in their stead. And so he was also accused of corrupting the youth that followed in his wake. After their defeat at the hands of the Spartans, after the bloodshed of the civil war, the Athenians were ready to seek vengeance on Socrates. By his constant questioning, he had transformed the traditional understanding of the gods' relationship with man, and thus had put the faith of the city in jeopardy. By encouraging his young followers to cultivate their intellectual curiosity and their independence of thought, he had corrupted their minds. Was he not a close friend of the traitor Alcibiades? At his trial, Socrates' line of defense was provocation. He was, he said, not the least, but the most pious man in Athens. By constantly seeking to determine if the god of Delphi was right, he was in fact paying homage to him. In his words, "When I heard the answer of the prophetess, I said to myself, what can the god mean? For I know that I have no wisdom, small or great. What can he mean when he says that I am the wisest of men? And yet he is a god, and cannot lie. That would be against his nature." And so he spent his life probing the mind of everyone, being not unconscious of the enmity which he provoked. But his mission was more important than his popularity. Eventually, he came to the following conclusion, which he expressed in the following terms to his judges. "The truth is, O men of Athens, that God only is wise. And in this oracle, he means to say that the wisdom of men is little or nothing. He is not speaking of Socrates. He is only using my name as an illustration, as if he said, he, O men, is the wisest who, like Socrates, knows that his wisdom is in truth worth nothing." Socrates was thus being pious when he obeyed the god's order to fulfill, in his words, the philosopher's mission of searching into himself and other men.